and welcome to episode 14 of the Gangrene Against the World podcast. I'm Allan Simon. Now that we are a couple weeks into the NFL season, it felt like a good time to have a New York football just pulse check with Sean Kenney. So Sean, thank you for joining me as my first repeat guest on the podcast.
Thank you, Allan. Good to be back, and 2 weeks into the season, and here we are. So,
It's a lot has changed. A lot has changed since we talked in the summer. The blissful eyes of preseason football, everything is looking up and thinking the best. As we've come accustomed to with these two teams, things have started a little rocky. To start, though, want to go in with the news today. Justin Fields will be out against the Buccaneers in Week 3. He suffered a concussion that came after putting up the worst performance in his career. So we know it's going to be Tyrod Taylor. So that's the biggest injury news, but we also have Jermaine Johnson, who looks hurt. Michael Carter is banged up and did not practice today. So there's a laundry list of folks who did not practice for the Jets today on Wednesday. So we'll see as the week goes to see if any of those players get a limited practice in and can maybe play come this weekend. But we know it's going to be Tyrod Taylor. And we also know that Aaron Glenn is starting to be fully exposed by the New York media. And Sean, as you know, you never want to battle the New York media. They're not the same as they are in Detroit. They just aren't. And he's a little rough around the edges. He's a little direct. What's really bothered me is he's come out with some of the great coaching cliches that you hear once things are starting to go bad. And it's only week 2, the outside noise. Those guys never played a snap of football in their lives. There's no instant coffee Super Bowls, all the famous cliches. But, the Week 3 is going to be important for both the Jets and the Giants. The Jets have a little bit more noise around them just because of the debacle that was the play against the Bills. But if we're looking at Tyrod Taylor, who's going to be starting for the Jets Week 3, I'm just curious, Sean, the last start he had was in 2023 with the Giants. What was your perspective of Tyrod when he was the backup and got some play in 2023? And what are your thoughts about him leading the Jets going into Week 3?
Yeah. No, I think he's become kind of the new journeyman quarterback. He played for the Giants for 2 years, I think 14 games over the 2 seasons. And he played pretty well coming in for Daniel Jones in that second year before he went to the Jets. We were hoping to bring him back actually as our backup there last year, and that's when he moved over, right? So I think what he does give you is he gives you a guy that can read a defense and throw the ball down the field, and that's something that we actually were able to get a little excited about when we had him there as a starter. Push the ball down the field. Certainly interested to see how the coaches work him, into a team like yours, the Jets, that are, run heavy and can be a threat in the run. Can give you, can manage the game well. As a serviceable backup and could win you a game. A tough opponent in Tampa Bay to start, so that makes it a bit of a challenge. But you certainly have some hope, I think, with him as a good player that can read a defense.
Yeah, and there's a reason why they paid him so much to be the backup last year, to come in and make sure they had some sort of security behind Aaron Rodgers, because he was an older quarterback, obviously. And although he did not have to come into action at all last year, we knew when Justin Fields was brought here that he's a mobile quarterback. He takes a lot of hits. There's going to be a chance Tyrod Taylor comes in. And I've spent a lot of time this preseason talking about who's going to be the QB3, and why it matters is because Tyrod is also someone who's had a lot of injuries in his career. But I do agree, Tyrod is a competent quarterback. He is the new Fitzpatrick, just kind of going everywhere, and maybe he can have a veteran type of, final chapter like we saw with Vinny Testaverde back in the day. So I'm excited that he's someone, at least I know I can trust, to go in and throw the ball downfield. Also, the Jets offensive line has given the most time in pocket to their quarterbacks this season in the first 2 weeks. So it isn't like Justin Fields didn't have time to make plays when he struggled against the Bills. And I think you give Tyrod that time, he's going to do more, and he's going to have an opportunity to get the ball to Garrett Wilson more, use the tight ends a little bit more. So certainly going to be interesting to see how they utilize him out of the gate. For the Giants, they come off of their 2 weeks were the opposite of the Jets. The Jets had a really competitive week 1 and then a no-show week 2. the Giants week 1 looked like a lot of teams look in week 1, just very rusty, really couldn't move the ball at all. And then they have a crazy shootout against the Cowboys, a game they should have won, and they end up losing in overtime. So overall, what's the pulse check with the Giants? What were your feelings after 2 weeks, and where do you stand right now on this team?
I was so optimistic in the offseason. I think the last time we talked, I was just really excited to see them compete. And the game 2 was a bit of what I expected to start to see with Russell Wilson pushing the ball down the field. He completed 7 20-yard plus passes, which I don't expect him to do that every week. I think you're not going to get the same kind of defenses that the Cowboys played against the Giants, but week 1 couldn't be any worse. And I just had that same feeling of here we are again, right? It's all the same offensive line play and quarterback play and sacks and not being able to run the ball. And I think even Washington gave us enough chances to get back into that game, and we still weren't able to move the ball at all offensively. It was kind of like flipping the script in the Jets season so far, right? You had that good game and then a bad one. And for us, it was a bad one, and then one that I just thought we would win, right? I mean, it felt that way right from the jump. Weren't scoring touchdowns early, but started to get them in the end zone, and 2 touchdowns to Malik Neighbors and some heroics at the end with only 25 seconds left in the game. And I'm screaming up and down and my dog is jumping on me and it's all fun. And then, Braden Aubrey kicks a 64-yard field goal to just stab a knife in our heart again. Here we both are at 0-2. So.
That game, I was listening driving back from the Jets game, and I'm flipping back and forth between the Giants on the radio and then listening to Aaron Glenn's post game. And every time I flip back to the Giants, there's another score, another touchdown. And it felt like they deserved that win. Russell Wilson deserved that win after, that great final drive. And it seems like a moment of all right, this team is back. The Cowboys aren't great, but that's a team that you still want to beat. And Dak Prescott owns the Giants currently, and his winning streak continues against the Giants. Having a kicker who can make, if you're at midfield, you're in his range, is a real luxury. And then you had the full Russell Wilson experience. He then hurls an interception, punt basically downfield in overtime, and the Giants lose. What's been your takeaway with Russell Wilson so far, and how are you feeling about his play and the quarterback situation right now for the Giants?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of the operation is one half of the answer to that question is, offensive line play, quarterbacks putting their head down. It happened last year with Danny Jones. You look over in Indianapolis and it's even harder to say they're 2-0 and Daniel Jones is second in the league in passing right now. Actually second to Russell Wilson, believe it or not. But I think he responded well, right, to a bad game to start the season. And, you always wonder how they're going to play in a regular season game coming off a preseason where starting quarterbacks don't really play a whole lot. What is the response going to be? I think you even saw it from Jaden Daniels with some missed passes in that first game against us. And so, I liked his response. I like his leadership, and I think he bought himself a little more time. I think there's a lot of people calling for Jackson Dart to start even game 2, which the Giants just weren't going to do yet. We're not going to go there yet. But, I think he responded well and bought himself some more time. And I think that's part of the plan for the Giants is to continue to play him. And hopefully we can turn this thing around a bit. The schedule is just so daunting. So I just don't have too much optimism for it. But you got to be a little more excited to at least see the offense move the ball and make some plays, and even their losses, it's a little more fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, coming from the Jets fan perspective, that's exactly if week 2 was the Pittsburgh game, you're 0-2, but you don't feel as bad. And obviously it's a heartbreaking loss as well. The Giants had, but now you take on an 0-2 Chiefs team at MetLife Stadium, the home opener. I'm talking to my bartender, John, behind section 109, and he already knows where Taylor Swift's going to be sitting. It's going to be a big event, and you almost wish you didn't get the Chiefs at 0-2. It's Mahomes' first time ever being 0-2, and now you face a good defense. I think that offense for the Chiefs doesn't look great. That offense looks slow. They look old. The rumors about Tyreek Hill are going to get louder and louder as Miami falters and probably falls to 0-3. But the Giants need to find a way to put up the same amount of points, or at least put up that kind of offense. And Russell Wilson can do that. And I think the hype in the preseason was maybe a little overblown, but it is exciting to see your guys look good. But no one's playing really tough defenses, and no one's going full speed in the preseason. And Russell Wilson does look old. Week 1, he looked really old, but he's proven he can throw the ball downfield, and Malik Neighbors is an elite wide receiver. And if you got him, you got to find a way to get him the ball. What do you make of the Jackson Dart, Jameis Winston 2-3 in the depth chart? Because my feeling is Dable can be that guy every so often where he doesn't want to tell you the full truth. So he lists Dart at 2, but I felt if Wilson really struggled again, Winston would be the guy you put in because Andrew Thomas is out and you don't want your rookie quarterback to get killed. Do you get a sense that if things go south with Russ, that Winston is next, or do you think they go to Dart next in line?
I think they're going to Dart. I don't think that was their original plan. I think coming into this offseason, the idea was to let Jackson Dart sit for even the whole season if he needed to, or if he were to come play, it'd be maybe within the last 4 games of the season. If it's a lost season, right, you put him in and you build some momentum going into 2026. I think he's Dable's guy, and I think Dable's trying to save his jobs.
Yep.
I think if you're looking at ownership, you're going, well, let's give him some hope of if you're a coach trying to save your job, you're giving ownership some hope through a new quarterback. They didn't even dress Jameis in game 1.
Mm-hmm.
They just had Dart and Russell Wilson. That changed for game 2, but I think they go right to Dart. I mean, you saw a couple packages they put in the game against the Cowboys. They had him do some kind of run option plays, and he didn't run it himself. He handed it off. And so I think that's who fans are calling for. I think it's, our future, right? And Jameis gives you a backup going into next year then too. But I think they're going to go there if it gets bad here in the next couple of weeks. If we keep losing, I think Russ has got probably about 4 games if we keep losing before they'd probably make a move like that or consider making a move. Maybe it's the Saints game or something like that.
Yeah, you want a soft landing for a rookie, right? Especially find a way to get Andrew Thomas back or at least get that offensive line into some sort of, workable situation because it's been a struggle so far. And what I don't understand, if you're the Giants, there's big quarterback injuries that have already hit across the league. If Winston's not my backup, then trade him, right? Get something back for him. The Bengals could use him. The Vikings, they don't know what's going on with J.J. McCarthy. He's been the second worst quarterback, from PFF. So it's there's a need for someone like Winston somewhere. But Dart, he looks the part. But to your point exactly, if I'm Dable, I only get to pull that card once. And the second I show Dart and maybe he doesn't look great, then that could probably cost you your job. Or if you wait towards the end of the season is probably, you're going to be a little bit below 500, then I can play him. And if he looks promising, then that probably buys you another year. So it's a delicate situation right now. You mentioned Daniel Jones, and I hate to pick at that scab, but, 2-0 for the Colts. The Texans are 0-2. It looks like that the Colts, if they can, play Jacksonville well, they have the inside track on that division. You lived through the Daniel Jones experience, which was a lot more with his legs when he was a Giant, but here he is throwing the ball, hurling it all around. He's the 3rd highest rated quarterback in the NFL. What's the noise around Giants fans right now when they look at Daniel Jones put up some serious numbers in Indianapolis?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and I look at the stats and leading the league and second in the league in passing right now, and winning 2 games to start the year, even though they kind of got a little lucky with that penalty before the final kick last week. But yeah, I think he's an inconsistent quarterback is what we saw, right? But it makes me question whether it is the operation. It is the offensive line, right? I mean, good teams have a good offensive line, and you can get away with average to above average quarterback play and you can make it into the playoffs. So I think that's what they've got, a good operation. And it makes me question the coaching at the Giants, right? Like just how they managed them and how they coached them and what the culture was. And I think he was just used to a losing culture. And that's what, unfortunately, the Giants are, a losing culture right now. And there are good, talented players on the team, but, you don't have the winning culture. And I think Daniel Jones is in a good situation now where it's benefiting him. And that's I think there's Giants fans that are rooting for it and they're excited for him to, go out there and do something different and feel good about being a quarterback. And I think there are other people that are like in the Saquon Barkley camp where it's like, okay, here we go again. And that's just part of what we have to deal with, is seeing players go to other teams and be successful.
I mean, it's definitely an indictment on Dable, right? He is supposed to be the quarterback whisperer.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones is a poor man's Josh Allen, and they really couldn't figure it out with him. And it's 2 games. There's to me, the biggest overreacting always happens after 2 weeks, because there are good teams that are 0-2. There are bad teams that are 2-0. There's a lot of football left to be played, but Daniel Jones is showing that promise that he showed in New York. And you mentioned that offensive line. James Hudson very dramatically gets pulled from that game after trying to set a record for most penalties in a game on the first possession. Overall, that left tackle position, obviously without Andrew Thomas, has been a mess. What do you expect to be the formation going into week 3 against the Chiefs? And is there hope for that position group to get a little bit more stable?
Yeah, I mean, I think you had a player that basically just gave away a game almost. I mean, gave up 4 points at least, right? With all the penalties, you get the ball down to the 2-yard line, 15-yard penalty, and you end up having to kick a field goal. I think they're going to go with Bo. If Andrew Thomas is not ready, who's starting to seem like he's trending, I've been following the injury report. He practiced today. He's starting to trend towards starting. So maybe we see him this week. But I think the rookie played well, and to get a 5th round, rookie tackle who's a bit undersized but has good feet and moves well, in there, and haven't played a great pass rush yet. So I think that's okay as he kind of gets some experience. I think I'd expect to see him over Hudson, right? And they paid Hudson $12 million a year to be your backup swing tackle, and it's a premium for a position. And unfortunately, he's just in his head, and I don't have any tolerance for that. And I don't think coaches should either. And I don't think a lot of the fans online I was following on Twitter, and people are just, get him off the team. They'd be fine with cutting him already, right? Even though there's some dead cap there.
Yeah.
So I think
you can't be getting rid of linemen who at least theoretically can play. That's for sure.
Yeah.
No, it was not a good look. And there's one thing to really just crash out like you did in that drive, and then you get benched and you throw a hissy fit on the sideline. He didn't go the extra extent like Evan Neal did and tear down the Giants fan, but that doesn't fly in New York. On the Jets side, we're dealing with the Michael Clemens predicament, the conundrum that is Michael Clemens, a guy who was at one point a nice story, but is overexposed. He has a brutal penalty on 3rd and 19 against Josh Allen, and he hits him a little late and a little high, and it's the same thing over and over and over again. I was mixing it up on Twitter today with some people arguing with me that you can't just cut every guy who makes a big mistake. But when it's Xavier Gibson, who should not have made the team, then he has a costly fumble against the Steelers, you cut him. Michael Clemens, there's an argument he shouldn't have to be on this team either. You had a guy like Jawan Briggs step up and play great in his first real action with the Jets. So the temper tantrum on the sideline is just not what you want from a guy you're paying a lot of money, like you said. And the whole reason you had him was in case Andrew Thomas does get hurt, and instead now you're dealing with this kind of nonsense. I'm curious, you look at both these teams right now, you look at the schedules, they both have a rough stretch ahead of them, although the Jets schedule does open up a little bit. If you had to choose, which would you think that the Jets are in better shape to potentially make a run and kind of dig out of this, or would you say the Giants do?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think, and even going back to that last conversation, it's okay to tolerate some of players doing those things if you have a winning culture. And now coming to this question, losing culture, it's tough, right? Like, how do you change that, right? It comes down to coaching. It comes down to players stepping up and being leaders and building towards something that can give you some momentum. It is a 17-game season, and being 0-2 is not a great way to start. And you can probably find all kinds of statistics that say all these teams don't make the playoffs. Don't want to go 0-3, right? And so, it starts with this coming weekend, and can you win the game this weekend? And that's a way to start to shift the conversation. I just don't see a path for the Giants. I think here, like our issue is in so many places, and we have some good pieces, and we'll probably win some games off of Russell Wilson making a couple deep passes, and you win some out, but don't like the offensive operation. And I don't want to be negative about the team. I think there's going to be some exciting games, but I just don't like the operation. And I think that could lead to coaches leaving and all kinds of things happening for us, and could turn into a lost season real quick. So I think the Jets have a better shot. You've got a new coach, you've got some stability there, and whether it's getting rough already or not, I think their coaches can withstand that within the first year and kind of build towards something. And you got a good offensive line that can run the ball behind, slow games down, and win some. And, you're in a division with now Miami, who we didn't expect to be as poor to start the year, right? So I think you've got some winnable games coming up in the next couple of weeks. And I think, like we talked about, like the Bills are just so good, it's going to be hard to ever win the division until you can figure something out there. But I just see the Jets season going better. I think there's some probably more exciting games in the Giants year. I think we'll win some games we're not expected to win, but I just think, you lose to Kansas City this weekend and you start 0-3 and all things start getting thrown out the window, and you're bringing in rookie quarterbacks and coaches are getting fired and all kinds of things can happen, right?
So. Yeah, I mean, it can spiral pretty quickly. I saw a poll, I think it was ESPN New York, or it was a poll that had a lot of votes on it. Who would you rather be long term, right? The Giants or the Jets? And last year polls like that all went towards the Jets because you knew you were cleaning the slate, all this kind of stuff. And now you're seeing a new regime, and because there's no wins yet, it feels uglier. And I think 75% of that vote went to they'd rather the Giants. Part of that is because of Dart, right? The promise of Dart. There's no more beloved person than the backup quarterback, right? Because you haven't seen them yet, but there's all this hope and potential behind them. I think the Giants, if they're ever going to beat the Chiefs, now's the time. While the Chiefs look a little rusty and a little slow, it's tough that that's on prime time. But for the Jets, the Bengals game now looks a lot different, obviously without Joe Burrow. Miami, I would not be surprised if Miami has an interim head coach when they meet on Monday Night Football coming up next week. And Jets Twitter definitely thinks that it'd be a very Jets thing to do is you upset Tampa Bay just to then lose the Dolphins on, Monday Night Football. But I have to agree, one win I think just cleans the slate for the Jets. If they can find a way to upset Tampa, which I think will be really hard to do, but if they can either be competitive and not have it look like last week, or find a way to steal a win by, really dominating on the ground, then everything looks different and that schedule looks a little bit more easier to navigate. And for the Giants, looking at those first 8 games, you're looking at 2-6, 1-7, unless the offense continues to look like it did last week. So I just want to end with anything else across the NFL that's kind of piqued your interest besides Daniel Jones. Obviously, for me, I've never been a believer in J.J. McCarthy, and you don't want to see a guy get hurt. And I love there's conspiracy theories already about like they're just hiding him based, they're putting an injury on him. He was running fine. His ankle can't be that bad. But I think that the North outside the Packers is going to be really interesting. The Packers, to me, seem like the best team in the NFC and maybe the NFL. The Lions made a statement against a bad Bears team, but I don't think the Lions are as good. I think the Vikings are really going to struggle, and the Bears are not great. And that opens the door to more teams. When you thought that the North's going to get 2 or 3 teams, I think the NFC is wide open, which is why if the Giants can find a way, to be 500 halfway through the year, at least you can talk about something. But I think that'll be a challenge. Anything that stood out to you so far in the first 2 weeks of the season?
Yeah, I think you talk about divisions. I think the AFC West is really interesting too. I mean, you've got the Chiefs at 0-2, and by some miracle, if the Giants beat them, they could go 0-3. And you've got the Chargers now that look like this standout team, playing really good defense. Justin Herbert throwing it all around the field. I think they're a really interesting story, as the season moves on. Can they even go out there and win the AFC West and even upset Denver and the Chiefs, right? And be maybe one of the better teams in the league. I like you said, I think Green Bay is going to be a good test, and I'm really interested to see how they match up against the Eagles when the two of them play this year, right? So that should be kind of a look at the NFC Championship.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So some cool stories there. I really like the Chargers. I think they're going to be an interesting team, moving forward here. I didn't expect them to come out as hot as they did and win some good games. And I think that's an interesting story for sure.
Yeah. And, Harbaugh knows how to coach. And Justin Herbert, the last 8 weeks last season, he was phenomenal. He was a top 5 quarterback, and they've got a nice little run game going. Najee Harris is healthy now, and the Chargers are interesting. I think this playoffs is gonna look different than the last few years. This is not going to be Chiefs, Ravens, Bengals, Bills. I think it's going to be Bills, Ravens, and then anyone else can go in there and throw their hat in the ring. Maybe it'll be Daniel Jones and the Colts we'll be talking about. Making a run in the AFC South Invitational. But, well, Sean, listen, I felt like it was the right time to do a little pulse check of New York football after 2 weeks of a lot of ups and downs on both sides. So thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, good to be on, and let's get some wins.
How about this? It's so rare that the Jets and Giants can win at the same time. And it's also rare they're not both playing at 1 o'clock. So at least we can watch full games, of New York football. A really cool guest for the Tampa Bay perspective coming up for Jets Bucks. Giants and Chiefs are coming up on Sunday Night Football. This has been episode 14 of the Gangrene Against the World podcast. Sean Kenney's been my guest, and I'm Allan Simon. Thank you for listening.